When I first told my family I wanted to open a clinic, they laughed. My brother Mark shook his head and said, "Hannah, you barely have enough money for rent. How are you going to build a clinic?" His wife, Linda, smirked and added, "Maybe she'll turn it into a toy shop when it fails." Even my mother, Patricia, sighed heavily and said, "Why can't you just find a safe job like everyone else?" Their words stung, but I stayed quiet. They didn't see the nights I worked double shifts, the hours I studied, or the way I saved every cent. To them, I was still the dreamer who aimed too high. I tried to explain. It won't be easy, but this community needs affordable care. I can do it if I start small. Mark rolled his eyes. You'll never last 6 months. They laughed together, and I sat there, burning inside. They didn't just doubt me, they wanted me to fail. That night, I stood in front of the mirror and whispered, "I'll prove them wrong. Even if it kills me." I didn't know then how right I was. The first steps were brutal. I rented a tiny, abandoned office on the edge of town. The roof leaked when it rained, the walls were cracked, and the floor smelled of dust. Still, I saw potential. I spent nights scrubbing, painting, and patching holes with my own hands. If you like our revenge stories, please subscribe for more. We drop powerful news stories every week, filled with truth, emotion, and justice. Don't miss the next one. And remember, some stories hurt, but they heal too. Subscribe now, and join the journey. Money was always short. I took double shifts at the hospital to save up, then worked on the clinic until my eyes burned from exhaustion. Some nights, I slept on the floor with a blanket, too tired to drive home. Vendors laughed when I asked about equipment. "You can't afford this," one sneered. I bought secondhand supplies instead. A used stethoscope, old exam tables, and mismatched chairs became my foundation. Through it all, I heard my family's mocking voices in my head. Mark calling me foolish. Linda smirking. Patricia doubting me. Those voices almost crushed me, but they also lit a fire inside. Every stroke of paint, every penny saved, every sore muscle whispered the same thing: keep going. One night, standing in the half-finished clinic, I whispered, "This place will heal people. One day, they'll regret ever laughing." I didn't realize that day would come sooner than I thought. The day the clinic finally opened, I expected silence. Instead, 3 patients showed up. An elderly man with a bad cough, a mother with her child, and a young woman who had been turned away from a larger hospital because she couldn't pay. I treated them with everything I had. My tools were old, my supplies limited, but I gave them my full attention. When the mother left, she squeezed my hand and whispered, "Thank you. No one else would see us." Her words melted the exhaustion from my body. By the end of the week, more people came. They heard there was a doctor who cared more about patients than money. Sometimes I charged only a few dollars, sometimes nothing at all. I kept a jar labeled, "Pay what you can." It filled slowly, but each coin reminded me I was building something real. The cracked walls didn't matter. The mismatched chairs didn't matter. What mattered were the smiles, the relief, the hope I saw in my patients' eyes. That night, I locked the clinic door, looked back at the tiny waiting room, and whispered, "It's working." The laughter of my family felt further away already. One Sunday, I visited my family for dinner. I was excited to share that my clinic had already treated over 30 patients in the first month. As soon as I spoke, Mark laughed so hard he nearly dropped his fork. 30 patients? That's not a clinic, it's a hobby, he sneered. Linda chimed in, "I bet she's giving out candy instead of medicine." Even my mother, Patricia, shook her head and said, "Hannah, you're wasting your best years. No one builds a life out of a shabby office." I clenched my hands under the table, forcing a smile. It's growing. People are starting to trust me. Mark smirked. Trust won't pay the bills. They laughed together, like it was a family joke. I excused myself early, driving back to the clinic with tears burning in my eyes. But when I walked into my small office, I saw flowers on the counter. A note read, "Thank you, Dr. Cole, for saving my father's life. We'll never forget." I pressed the note to my chest. My family's mockery still hurt, but the gratitude of strangers healed me more. For the first time, I realized I didn't need their approval. 2 months after opening, something unexpected happened. A local reporter stopped by. She said she'd heard about a tiny clinic with a big heart and wanted to do a story. I almost turned her away. My clinic looked far from impressive. The paint was still uneven, the chairs still mismatched. But she insisted, so I agreed. If you like our revenge stories, please subscribe for more. We drop powerful news stories every week, filled with truth, emotion, and justice. Don't miss the next one. And remember, some stories hurt, but they heal too. Subscribe now, and join the journey. She took photos of me treating patients, listening to children's heartbeats, and helping an elderly woman walk. She asked why I opened the clinic, and I told her, because no one should be turned away from care just because they can't pay. A week later, the story ran on the front page of the town paper, Dr. Builds Clinic of Hope. The calls started immediately. Families wanted appointments. Volunteers offered to help clean and paint. Even businesses donated supplies. The waiting room, once empty, now filled with life and laughter. That night, I held the newspaper and smiled through tears. For the first time, I felt the weight lifting. Of course, when my family saw it, they weren't proud. Mark scoffed, "A pity story won't last." But deep down, I knew the tide had turned. The clinic wasn't just surviving. It was growing. After the newspaper story, everything changed. The clinic, once quiet and uncertain, became a place people trusted. Mothers brought their children, workers came after long shifts, and elderly patients who had been ignored by big hospitals finally had someone to listen to them. Every day, the waiting room filled with faces. I hired a part-time nurse, then another assistant to help with records. I could barely keep up, but the energy was thrilling. Donations poured in, fresh paint, new chairs, even medical equipment. Volunteers helped transform the building from a patched-up shack into a true clinic. The walls no longer leaked, and the dusty floor gleamed like new. One evening, as I closed up, I noticed a line of patients still waiting outside. They waved when I stepped out. One woman called, "Thank you, doctor. You're a blessing to this town." For the first time, I felt the dream becoming real. When I told my family about the growth, Mark muttered, "It's beginner's luck." Linda crossed her arms. "Let's see how long it lasts." But this time, their words didn't sting. I had proof in every grateful patient's eyes. And my story was just beginning. As weeks turned into months, the clinic only grew busier. I barely had time to sit, yet every night I went home with a heart full of purpose. Patients came not just from our town, but from nearby villages too. Word had spread. But my family? Silence. Not once did they step through the doors. No visit. No support. No acknowledgement. At family dinners, they avoided the subject altogether. My brother talked about his new car, Linda showed off her shopping, and Mark bragged about his promotion. Whenever I mentioned the clinic, the room went quiet, and someone quickly changed the topic. It was clear. They wanted me to fail. One Sunday, my father finally spoke up. "You've always been stubborn, Rose. You should have let your siblings guide you." His words cut deep, but I didn't reply. I only smiled, remembering the patients who now relied on me. Behind their silence was something else, envy. I could feel it in the way they glanced at each other when I mentioned new hires or donations. They didn't see a struggling dream anymore. They saw something becoming real. And envy is far louder than words. The clinic hit its first anniversary. I organized a small celebration with staff, patients, and community leaders. We cut a modest cake, and the mayor himself showed up to thank us for saving lives. My heart swelled with pride. That evening, the local newspaper ran a feature, Dr. Rose Turner's clinic brings hope to forgotten families. My picture was on the front page, standing with patients who once had no access to care. That's when the shift began. Suddenly, my phone buzzed non-stop. Cousins I hadn't spoken to in years congratulated me. Old neighbors said they always believed in me. Even Linda posted the article on Facebook, pretending she had supported me all along. But the most surprising call came from my mother. Her tone was softer than I expected. "Rose, your father read the article. We didn't know you were doing so well." I held the phone in silence, unsure whether to laugh or cry. For the first time, they weren't dismissing me. They weren't mocking me. But I also knew the truth, this wasn't love. It was recognition. And recognition, in their world, was the first step toward wanting a share. The real storm was coming. A week after the article, my parents showed up at the clinic. They hadn't visited once during construction, not even when I begged for help lifting equipment. Now, they walked in proudly, smiling as though they owned the place. "Rose, this is wonderful," my father said, patting the counter like it was his own. "Your hard work really paid off." Linda was right behind them, carrying her designer purse. She looked around with wide eyes, calculating. "So how many patients do you get a day? And what's the profit like?" I kept my expression neutral, but inside, my guards shot up. Their sudden interest wasn't about pride, it was about opportunity. Later that night, Linda called. "You know, Rose, since the clinic is doing well, maybe the family should be more involved. It would look better if we all had a stake. Think of it, the Turner Family Clinic." Her words chilled me. They weren't asking to help. They were demanding entry. I smiled into the phone, though my stomach twisted. "That's an interesting idea, Linda. Let me think about it." But I already knew my answer. They hadn't built this. They hadn't believed in me. And they weren't about to take it. The calls started coming almost daily. First, it was Linda, hinting about how family businesses thrive more than solo ones. Then my brother Kevin joined in, suggesting he could manage finances, since he once worked at a bank. My father even chimed in, saying, "It's time you honored us by letting the family be part of your success." They weren't offering help. They wanted control. When I didn't agree immediately, their tone shifted. Linda scoffed, "You think you got here alone? We raised you, didn't we? Without us, there'd be no clinic." Her words stung, but I stayed calm. I knew the clinic's books were clean and legally airtight. Still, their persistence wore on me. One evening, I found Linda waiting in the parking lot. "You should think carefully, Rose," she said coldly. "This clinic could be a family empire, or it could all fall apart if you push us away." It wasn't just greed anymore. It was a threat. I locked up the clinic and drove home, heart pounding. They underestimated me, though. They thought I'd fold under pressure. But all they were doing was giving me reason to plan my revenge carefully. They finally arranged it, an official, family meeting, at my parents' house. The air was heavy even before I stepped through the door. Linda sat straight-backed with her husband beside her. Kevin had a briefcase as if this were some corporate takeover, and my father presided at the head of the table like a judge. "Rose," my father began, "we've discussed it. The clinic should belong to the family. It's only right." I bit back a laugh. The same family who mocked me now wanted to claim what I built. Kevin slid a paper toward me. "We drafted a proposal. You keep your position as head doctor, but we'll manage the money and growth." Linda leaned forward. "You'll finally have real support. Think of how big this can become with us leading." I looked around the table, their eyes gleaming with greed, not care. "I hear you," I said calmly, folding the paper. "I'll think about it." They mistook my quiet tone for hesitation. Smiles spread across their faces. But inside, I was already planning. This wasn't a negotiation. It was war, and I had no intention of letting them win. The moment I left my parents' house, I knew I couldn't face this blindly. If they were bold enough to draft papers and try to corner me, they wouldn't stop until they got their hands on my clinic. That night, I called Evelyn, my lawyer friend. She was sharp, loyal, and not afraid to fight. Over steaming cups of coffee, I explained everything. She frowned. "Rose, this isn't just family pressure. It's an attempted hostile takeover. But we can outsmart them." We spent hours going over my contracts, property deeds, and financial records. Everything was in my name, clean, protected. Still, Evelyn suggested extra layers, a trust to safeguard assets, backup accounts, and written documentation of every family conversation. Meanwhile, I quietly started recording interactions. Whenever Linda or Kevin called with demands, I saved the messages. Their words, once so casual and cruel, were now becoming my weapons. At the clinic, I reassured my staff nothing would change. But behind closed doors, I was setting traps. My family thought I was soft-hearted, too sentimental to resist them. What they didn't know was that I was about to show them how ruthless, the quiet one, could be. It happened on an ordinary Wednesday. The waiting room was full, and I was rushing between patients when Mrs. Green, a longtime patient, stopped me. Her voice trembled as she said, "Dr. Rose, I saw your sister at the market. She was telling people she and her husband run this clinic." I froze. Mrs. Green looked apologetic. "I thought you should know. She even said you'd be stepping aside soon, that the clinic would finally have real, business leadership." I thanked her, but inside, fury burned. Linda wasn't just trying to pressure me privately, she was poisoning my reputation publicly. Later that evening, I checked social media. Sure enough, there were posts hinting that family leadership was taking over the clinic. Some even tagged me, expecting confirmation. That was the moment I realized this wasn't a squabble. It was a full-blown campaign. But here's what Linda didn't expect: patients trusted me, not her. Within hours, comments flooded in defending my work, sharing their stories of how I'd saved their children, cared for their elders, or treated them with dignity. The community was speaking louder than my family's lies. And I was ready to amplify that voice. The next family dinner was tense. Linda arrived late, dressed like she was attending a board meeting, not a meal. Kevin carried his briefcase again, while my father looked stern and tired. As soon as we sat, Linda started. "Rose, the community is already aware that change is coming. You can't fight progress." I leaned back, calm. "Funny, Linda. My patients seem to think otherwise. Did you see the comments online? Hundreds of people defending me, not you." Her face twitched, just slightly, but enough for me to notice. Kevin jumped in, "That's temporary. Public opinion shifts. Numbers and money decide, not emotions." But even my father hesitated. "Maybe the timing is wrong," he muttered. For the first time, I saw it, cracks. Doubt in their perfect front. Linda snapped, "We just need to push harder." I smiled quietly, realizing their greed was blinding them. They were losing patience, losing control. After dinner, Evelyn texted me, "They're desperate. Desperation makes people sloppy. Stay calm. Let them expose themselves." I knew she was right. The cracks had appeared. And soon, those cracks would shatter everything they thought they could take from me. Evelyn called me into her office one crisp morning. "You're going to like this," she said, sliding her laptop across the desk. On the screen were screenshots of emails. Emails Linda had sent to local suppliers, signing off as the managing director of Rose Health Clinic. I stared, jaw tight. She wasn't just spreading rumors anymore, she was impersonating me. Evelyn smirked. "She's sloppy. She used her personal email. We have timestamps, full headers. Legally, this is fraud." As if that wasn't enough, Kevin had been busy too. Evelyn showed me voice recordings from his phone calls. He'd approached an investor, claiming he had partial ownership of my clinic and offering them a stake. The arrogance was staggering. "Rose," Evelyn said firmly, "this isn't just family drama. This is attempted theft. We can take them down legally, but you have to decide when to strike." I nodded, gripping the evidence folder tightly. At dinner that weekend, Linda smirked at me across the table, thinking she still held the upper hand. But all I could see were her fraudulent emails, her lies exposed, waiting to be unleashed. The game was no longer about survival. It was about revenge. That Sunday, my family pushed harder than ever. They invited me to my parents' house again, but this time, the atmosphere was charged. Kevin spread more papers across the table, full of numbers and projections. Linda leaned in, her voice sharp. "If you don't hand over partial control now, Rose, you'll regret it. We'll make sure no supplier works with you again." I wanted to laugh. They thought threats would corner me. But with the evidence Evelyn and I had gathered, I already held the winning card. Instead of exploding, I kept my composure. "I hear you," I said softly, "but I'm not ready to make a decision." Kevin scoffed. "Always so indecisive. This is why you need us." I stood up calmly. "I'll think about it." Their faces lit up, mistaking my patience for surrender. But walking out that door, I felt powerful. By not confronting them directly, I bought time to strengthen my case. Every arrogant word, every forged email, every false claim. They were digging their own graves. I didn't need to fight them face to face just yet. I only needed to let them bury themselves deeper. The pressure only grew worse. Within a week, Linda stormed into the clinic unannounced, strutting past the reception desk like she owned the place. Patients looked confused as she loudly announced, "I'll be overseeing things from now on." I walked out of my office, steady as ever. "Linda, you're disturbing my patients," I said firmly. She smirked. "They'll get used to me. Family leadership is coming whether you like it or not." I guided her outside, careful not to make a scene. But inside, fury boiled. Patients were unsettled. Staff whispered in frustration. My sanctuary was being tainted by her arrogance. That evening, Kevin called. His voice was smug. "You're making this harder than it needs to be, Rose. Sign the papers. Or your so-called clinic will crumble under pressure." I clenched my jaw, resisting the urge to yell back. Instead, I hit record and let him talk, capturing every threat word for word. By the time he hung up, my hand was trembling, not. Something changed after Kevin's last call. For months, I had played the quiet observer, collecting their lies, threats, and schemes. But now, it was time to move from defense to offense. Evelyn and I met late one night, spreading documents, recordings, and screenshots across her office table. "You've got more than enough," she said, eyes gleaming. "Fraud, impersonation, attempted coercion, this is airtight. The only question is, do you want to ruin them privately or publicly?" I thought about all the dinners where they mocked me, the cold silence when I succeeded, the threats they believed would break me. Public was the only choice. The shift wasn't just in strategy, it was in me. For the first time, I felt no guilt, no hesitation. They weren't my family anymore. They were predators, and I was ready to strike back. I began moving clinic ownership into a secure trust, transferring accounts, and updating suppliers. Every call, every visit, I stayed calm, but inside, I was preparing for war. Linda and Kevin thought they were cornering me. But they had no idea the ground beneath them was already crumbling. The shift had begun. The first strike was subtle. Evelyn helped me draft a carefully worded statement, which I posted on the clinic's social media page. "We've received reports of individuals falsely claiming to represent this clinic. Please know, Rose Health Clinic is independently owned and operated. Any misrepresentation will be handled through legal channels. It spread fast. Patients shared it, staff backed it, and the community rallied. The message was clear without naming names, but everyone knew exactly who it was aimed at. Linda called within an hour, voice shaking with rage. "How dare you humiliate me publicly?" I kept my tone calm. "I only told the truth, Linda." Kevin tried damage control, calling suppliers to reassure them. But Evelyn had already notified those same suppliers with proof of Linda's fraudulent emails. The suppliers cut ties with my siblings instantly, refusing to deal with them again. It was quiet, clean, and devastating. My family hadn't expected me to fight back with precision. The best part? I hadn't even revealed the recordings or financial lies yet. This was just the opening move. The quiet exposé had begun tearing their facade apart. The exposé shifted everything. For the first time, Linda and Kevin weren't strutting with confidence. At the next family dinner, they were pale, tense, whispering to each other instead of barking demands. But the real turning point came when my mother pulled me aside after the meal. Her voice cracked as she said, "Rose, I didn't know how far they'd gone. I should have defended you sooner." I stared at her, unsure if it was guilt or just fear speaking. For years, she had stayed silent while my siblings mocked and undermined me. Now, faced with the fallout, she finally looked me in the eye. "You're stronger than all of us," she admitted. "I see that now." For a moment, anger softened. But then I remembered the threats, the humiliation, the endless attempts to strip away everything I built. My siblings weren't sorry. They were scrambling. I realized something powerful then. I no longer needed their approval, their validation, or even their recognition. My clinic was mine. My life was mine. And soon, the whole town would see exactly who they really were, and who I had become. The town hall was packed that evening. I had been invited to speak about small businesses and healthcare, an honor that felt surreal after all the ridicule I'd endured. Evelyn nudged me as I stepped up to the podium. "This is your moment," she whispered. I spoke from the heart, about building the clinic from nothing, about serving patients who had nowhere else to turn, and about the importance of integrity in medicine. The crowd applauded, many standing to cheer. Then came the twist. Evelyn, standing beside me, presented evidence to the council, the forged emails, the recorded threats, the false claims of ownership. Gasps filled the room. Linda and Kevin, seated near the back, froze. Every eye turned toward them. Their carefully crafted image shattered in seconds. People whispered, murmurs spreading like wildfire, they tried to steal her clinic. It wasn't me who destroyed them, it was their own greed laid bare in public. As I stepped down, patient after patient hugged me, thanking me not just for care, but for standing tall against corruption. That night, my siblings lost the community's trust forever. And I gained something far greater than revenge, respect. The fallout was immediate. Suppliers who once humored Linda and Kevin cut all ties. Patients who had heard their rumors now saw the truth. Even my father, once their staunch defender, refused to meet their eyes at Sunday dinner. "Enough," he muttered, slamming his hand on the table. "You've brought shame on this family." Linda's face flushed crimson. "She turned everyone against us," she snapped, pointing at me. But the room stayed silent. No one believed her anymore. Kevin tried to argue numbers, saying the clinic could have been a family empire. But his words sounded hollow. The evidence had broken their credibility, and the community's support for me only widened the crack in their armor. That night, Linda called me, voice shaking. "Do you feel good? Ruining your own family?" I answered calmly, "I didn't ruin anything. You did when you tried to steal what I built." She hung up without a word. For the first time, I knew they weren't just losing power, they were losing control of themselves. And once cracks like these form, the whole structure eventually collapses. The weeks that followed were brutal for Linda and Kevin. Evelyn filed formal complaints, and the council opened an investigation into fraud and misrepresentation. Their names appeared in the local paper, not as rising leaders, but as cautionary tales. Linda's husband quietly distanced himself, embarrassed by the scandal. Kevin's job, already shaky, slipped away when his boss read the transcripts of his recorded threats. At family gatherings, they sat in silence, their voices no longer loud and mocking but low and bitter. My father refused to defend them. My mother, though pained, finally admitted, "You brought this on yourselves." Meanwhile, the clinic thrived. Donations increased, volunteers signed up, and patients poured in with gratitude. The same community Linda and Kevin tried to deceive now rallied behind me stronger than ever. The revenge wasn't loud or violent, it was slow, undeniable justice. They had wanted my clinic. Instead, they lost everything they thought gave them power, respect, reputation, and control. And the best part? I hadn't lifted a single lie. I had only revealed their truth. Sometimes, consequences are the most poetic form of revenge. I didn't plan it, but the moment came naturally. After Sunday dinner, I found myself alone in the garden with Linda and Kevin. The night air was cold, their faces pale in the dim porch light. Linda crossed her arms. "You're enjoying this, aren't you? Watching us fall." I met her gaze steadily. "No. I'm not enjoying it. But I am finished letting you treat me like I'm less than you." Kevin scoffed. "We only wanted what's fair. Family should share." I took a deep breath. Family supports. Family respects. You laughed at me when I worked day and night. You tried to steal, lie, and intimidate. That's not sharing, that's betrayal. For once, neither had a comeback. The silence was heavier than any argument. I didn't yell. I didn't threaten. I simply walked away, leaving them with their guilt, their shame, and the broken pieces of their own making. Revenge didn't come with fireworks, it came with calm truth they couldn't escape. That night, I slept better than I had in years. Because the war was over. And I had won. Months later, the clinic stood taller than ever. We'd expanded to include a children's wing, funded by grateful families and community donations. My name, Dr. Rose Clinic, was etched proudly at the entrance. Meanwhile, Linda and Kevin were shadows of who they once pretended to be. Linda avoided town gatherings, unable to face the whispers. Kevin had moved back in with my parents after losing his job, his confidence shattered. One afternoon, as I finished with a patient, I saw them both standing hesitantly in the lobby. Their voices were low, almost desperate. "Rose," Linda whispered, we need help." I looked at them, once so loud and cruel, now humbled by their own downfall. For a moment, I felt pity, but then I remembered every threat, every lie, every attempt to steal my life's work. "I help patients," I said softly. "Not thieves." I turned back to my staff, leaving them frozen in silence. Poetic justice wasn't about destroying them, it was about watching them live with the weight of their choices while I thrived. They had mocked me for dreaming too big. And now, they were left begging at the doors of the dream they tried to steal. If this story moved you, don't forget to like the video, subscribe for more powerful narratives, and share your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear what part hit you the hardest. Thanks for watching.